Meet Rick Winters. He's going to make a jump from a height of 172 feet.
Just falls. Oh, he's got to hold it. He's moving a little too fast. Oh, he punched through.
Whoa, look at this. Safe and sound. And he also set a record. But what about a more serious altitude of 300 feet, 1,000, or even 10,000 feet? Many people are afraid of heights, and this is probably one of the most natural fears. When you realize what'll happen to your body when you fall, you want to stay as far away from any high points as possible. You can fall down and it hurts, and it can cost you your life. You'll never guess when everything could go wrong. This guy just wanted to take a beautiful photo, but he fell off a cliff and almost died. This fall paralyzed him, paralyzed without any help, alone among the rocks. You could have made a film like 127 Hours based on such a story. But fortunately, he didn't have to saw his hand off. After a while, the guy was found by tourists. It seems that to have survived, he spent not only his luck, but also the luck of his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. But not everyone manages to survive. A lot of people die and disappear every year while traveling and hiking. And one of the most frightening examples is Everest. About 300 people have died trying to climb to its summit. The bodies of most of them still remain on the mountain. You can even see them if you decide to conquer Everest, but the dead aren't left there as a tribute to grief. It's all about the money. It's very difficult and expensive to clean up the bodies. Not every family can afford to spend $100,000 just to get a body of a relative down to a normal height. At the same time, the probability that your ascent won't go according to plan is really high. A sudden change of weather, an avalanche, equipment that suddenly goes out of order, a broken rope, anything can happen. Jim Davidson and Mike Price were walking on the glacier surface after climbing when they suddenly fell into an ice cave. Mike died after the fall from a great height, and Jim was waiting for a slow death from the cold. There was no one nearby to help him. He was just alone with the indifferent ice blocks. It's hard to even imagine the horror he felt. However, Jim survived. He was able to climb the steep ice wall and escape from the trap. So what should a person who falls from a height of 10,000 feet do? The skills of a climber won't help there, but you can still survive after such a thing. In any case, history knows one example, and this is the story of Julianne Kopka. Julianne was only 17 when she flew with her mother in a plane over the jungle of Peru. It was Christmas Eve. Everyone was in a festive mood, except for the weather. The plane entered a stormy cloud, strong turbulence began, and then lightning suddenly hit the engine. Usually airplanes don't crash after contact with lightning. The fact is that the membrane that protects the cabin conducts electricity, but it doesn't let the discharge go too deep. The discharge doesn't reach the crew, passengers, or electronics, so the aircraft can move on. But Julianne and her mother were unlucky. The plane collapsed and the girl was thrown out, still trapped into her seat. Surprisingly, this is what saved Julianne's life. The thick tropical forest softened the fall, but she still lost consciousness. Julianne woke up the next morning, and she was surprised to find out that she'd survived the plane crash. She had only suffered just minor injuries. She could even walk. The probability that a passenger who got on a plane will die in a plane crash is about 1 in 8 million. If a person gets on a random flight every day, it'll take 21,000 years for him to die. But this doesn't mean that you may just not be lucky. There are many different recommendations on the internet as to how to survive a plane crash. For example, choose the right place, comfortable clothes to group, and never panic. Try not to panic when the plane's crashing? Well, we don't know if Julianne was aware of all these rules, but she did manage to survive. Leaves and branches slowed her fall, so she didn't break her back and didn't even get any internal bleeding. She wasn't the first to manage to use the vegetation in this way. It was a tree that saved the life of pilot Nicholas Alcemade in March 1944. His plane was shot down. The Englishman managed to get out of the burning aircraft, but he had no parachute. Despite the height of 18,000 feet, Alcemade was lucky to land on the crown of a large pine tree. Surprisingly, the pilot not only survived but even avoided serious injuries. So, if you have the opportunity to choose the place to fall, aim for the trees and thick bushes. But let's go back to Julianne's story. Her landing was very lucky, but also before the crash, she already knew a lot about tropical forests thanks to her parents. She understood the dangers of the jungle, and she was able to navigate quickly in one. She had heard search planes flying overhead, but the forest was too thick for her to be seen. Julianne decided to walk along a small creek, hoping that it would lead her to people. The only food that the girl had was a small pack of sweets. How long could you survive under these conditions? Julianne lasted 10 days. In the end, she could barely walk from weakness, but she still kept a clear mind. When she found a can of gasoline, she poured it over her wound to get rid of the larva. Who would have thought of such a thing? In the end, Julianne was rescued by fishermen, and she slept over in their cabin. Later, she found out that her mother and some other people survived the fall, but they sadly died later from the injuries. Julianne Kopka was the only survivor of the Lanza Flight 508 ordeal. Whoa, you watched all the way to this moment? Alright, cool. Well, we hope none of our viewers have yet got any flight phobia, because let's be honest, an emergency situation can happen not only in an airplane. Life is such a strange thing. It sometimes requires unusual decisions and strange actions from you. Remember that Leonardo DiCaprio movie? The one where he slept in a horse and survived after a bear attack? Well, something very similar to that happened in real life. So in this story too, there was a bear, a horse, and a man. A ranger named Ronny went to catch one of the particular mischievous horses that grazed nearby. He walked by the sound of a bell, as he'd done thousands of times before. But instead of a horse, he found a bear, or rather the bear found Ronny and tried to eat him. Trying to escape the predator, the ranger climbed a tree, but the bear quickly pulled him down. When Ronny fell, he must have hit his head and lost consciousness. He couldn't feel anything as the beast dragged him away from the tree. We don't know what the bear was going to do because apparently it wasn't hungry. But when the ranger came to his senses, there was that very same horse nearby. It had never been friendly before, but it was the horse that helped Ronny get up and get to people. This situation is unique not only because of the character of the animal, but everything around the ranger smelled like a bear. The smell should have scared the horse away. But you know, now that I think about it, this story shouldn't have been the Revenant reference. This is more like the second part of Lord of the Rings. Of course, Ronny didn't fall off a cliff and there was no orcs either, but it was enough with the bear. Fortunately, all the heroes of this story survived. So today we talked about altitude, planes, and bears, but sometimes the danger can hide where you least expect it. What do you think about when it comes to depth? Probably something about lack of oxygen, pressure, underwater monsters. Alejandro Ramos once made his living by collecting shellfish at great depths, but one day he was too close to a cargo ship and it cut the air hose. It was impossible to stay underwater. It was necessary to go to the surface, and to do so urgently. Now, usually it's a gradual process, but Ramos couldn't wait. He flew out of the water and almost lost his feelings. But the strangest and scariest thing was ahead of him. After a few seconds, the upper part of the man's body began to swell up. Before the rapid rise, Ramos had quite the usual parameters, but now his arms were 74 centimeters and his chest was 135 centimeters. How did this happen? Decompression sickness. When divers return to the surface too quickly without giving enough nitrogen to leave the body, it remains inside as bubbles. These bubbles can block the blood vessels and get into the joints, causing pain and swelling. Sometimes your whole body can swell, but even experienced doctors who constantly deal with such problems admit Ramos's case is unique, and everything is much more sad than it seems. Not only does it look unusual, but it also causes serious pain. And how to live if your size is so different from usual? The bones hurt and the chest makes a strange hiss every time the man inhales. And of course, Ramos can no longer make a living by collecting clams, not only because he can't fit into any suit. It's deadly dangerous to go underwater now. We can only feel for poor Ramos. We hope very much that doctors will find a way to, well, blow him up. After all, medicine today solves even the most difficult problems. Okay, what else? I think I forgot something. Oh, well, don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel if you want more of these videos, and press the bell to not miss anything. And be sure to share your impressions in the comments. We'll see you later. See you later.